I still remember the silence that followed. It hung in the air, heavy and cold, after Olivia finally said it. We were sitting at our kitchen table, the scent of sesame chicken growing stale between us, and she looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize. Not angry, not even defiant. Just rehearsed. Like she'd practiced it 100 times in front of a mirror. I decide who I spend time with, Daniel. You don't get a say. My fork, halfway to my mouth, clinked gently as I set it down. I looked her straight in the eye, and the only words I could find were, "Your choice." What she didn't know then, what she couldn't possibly grasp, was that I meant it with a finality that would unravel everything she thought she wanted. You see, for the past 4 months, the woman across from me had been slowly, subtly, morphing into a stranger. And I'm not talking about a new haircut or a hobby. This was a complete personality transplant. The Olivia I married 7 years ago? She would have laughed if someone suggested she needed to reclaim her power from me. But the Olivia now? She'd bought into it hook, line, and sinker. It all started small, as these things always do. She joined this empowerment circle, a women's group. Said it was just a book club with wine and conversation. I didn't think much of it, honestly. Olivia had always been social, always had friends, and I never had a problem with that. But this group, it was different. The leader was a woman named Veronica. Mid-30s, divorced twice, no kids, ran some kind of life coaching business out of a rented office downtown. Olivia came home from that first meeting talking about independence and self-actualization and toxic patterns in relationships. I figured it was just new vocabulary, the kind of buzzwords people pick up when they're trying to sound enlightened. But then the meetings went from once a month to twice a week, then 3 times. Then suddenly, Olivia was coming home at 11 o'clock at night, smelling like cigarettes and perfume that definitely wasn't hers, telling me they'd lost track of time. She'd talk about boundary setting. I'd ask simple questions, like if she wanted me to save her dinner, or if she needed me to pick anything up from the store. And she'd just snap. "Stop trying to control my schedule," she'd say. Or, "I don't need you managing my life." These weren't answers to my questions. They were accusations I didn't understand. One night, I made the mistake of mentioning that I missed spending time with her, that maybe we could plan a weekend trip like we used to. She stared at me like I'd just asked her to give up oxygen. "That's exactly what Veronica warned us about," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Partners who try to isolate you from your support system." I wasn't trying to isolate her from anyone. I was trying to have a conversation with my wife. But apparently, wanting your spouse's attention now qualified as a manipulation tactic. The empowerment circle had 3 core members besides Olivia. There was Charlotte, who left her husband of 12 years because he asked her to help pay the mortgage after she quit her job to start a jewelry business that never sold a single piece. There was Sarah, who was on her 3rd failed engagement and blamed each ex for not supporting her dreams, even though her dreams changed every 6 months. And then there was Veronica, the ringleader, who seemed to collect broken marriages like trophies. I met them once at a restaurant where Olivia insisted we have dinner with the group. Veronica dominated the entire conversation, talking about how women needed to stop dimming their light for men who couldn't handle their brilliance. Charlotte nodded along like a bobblehead. Sarah chimed in with stories about her exes that all sounded suspiciously similar, and Olivia sat there absorbing every word like it was gospel. I tried to engage, tried to be supportive, but every comment I made was met with condescending smiles. When I mentioned my promotion at work, Veronica cut me off mid-sentence. "That's wonderful," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "but let's keep the focus on the women tonight." I realized then that I wasn't invited to participate. I was invited to be judged. The changes in Olivia accelerated after that dinner. She started dressing differently, not for me, she'd say, but for herself. Which apparently meant low-cut tops and skirts she'd never worn before. She bought new jewelry, expensive pieces I'd never seen her wear around the house. She stopped texting me during the day, stopped asking about my work, stopped caring about the little routines we'd built together over 7 years. When I'd get home from work, she'd already be getting ready to leave for another meeting, another girls' night, another empowerment session. I found receipts for O'Malley's pub in her purse, places she swore she'd never been to. One night, I asked her directly if something was going on, if there was something she needed to tell me. She looked at me with such contempt. This is what Veronica said would happen. You can't handle me being independent, so you're trying to make me feel guilty. I wasn't trying to make her feel guilty. I was trying to understand why my wife was becoming a stranger. But in her mind, guided by Veronica's poison, every question was an attack. Every concern was control. Every attempt to connect was me trying to clip her wings. Here's what I learned during those 4 months. And maybe you've experienced this, too, if you've ever watched someone you love get pulled into something toxic. The red flags weren't just the late nights or the new clothes or even the receipts. The real warning sign was how she started rewriting our history. Suddenly, our 7 years together became a narrative of oppression she needed to escape from. Date nights we'd enjoyed became examples of me controlling her time. Decisions we'd made together became proof I'd manipulated her. Our entire marriage got filtered through Veronica's lens until nothing good remained. That night in the kitchen, when she told me I didn't get a say in who she spent time with, something shifted in me. I'd spent 4 months trying to understand, trying to adapt, trying to save something that she was actively destroying. I'd made excuses for the late nights, the distant behavior, the way she talked to me like I was her enemy instead of her partner. But sitting there, watching her eat cold Chinese food with the same hand that used to reach for mine across tables, I realized I was done fighting for someone who didn't want to be fought for. So when I said your choice, I meant it completely. She wanted independence, wanted freedom from my questions, my concern, my presence. And I was about to give her exactly what she asked for, though not in the way she expected. She smiled at me that night, thinking she'd won some kind of victory, thinking I'd finally learned my place. What she didn't know was that I'd already started making plans. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been scrolling through Instagram late one night when I noticed something odd. Olivia had posted a story geotagged at O'Malley's pub downtown at 1:45 in the morning. The timestamp was clear, the location was clear, and the lie she told me that night was clear, too, because she'd texted me at midnight saying she was watching movies at Charlotte's apartment and heading to bed soon. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder on my laptop, and started paying closer attention. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Instagram stories at clubs while she texted me about quiet nights in. Credit card charges for lingerie she never wore around me. Her wedding ring sitting in the bathroom drawer more nights than it was on her finger. Every lie had a timestamp, a receipt, a digital footprint she was too careless to hide. The Thursday night before our kitchen conversation, I'd gone to O'Malley's pub myself. I sat at the corner, ordered a beer I barely touched, and watched. Olivia walked in around 10:30 with Veronica, Charlotte, and Sarah. All of them dressed for a nightclub rather than any kind of empowerment meeting. I watched Veronica lead them to a booth where 2 guys were already waiting. Watched my wife slide into the seat next to a man who immediately put his arm around her shoulders. She laughed at something he said, touched his arm, leaned into him like she'd known him for years. Her wedding ring was noticeably absent. I didn't cause a scene, didn't confront her, didn't even let her see me. I took 3 photos on my phone, finished my beer, and left. The evidence spoke louder than any argument I could have made. So, when she sat across from me that night and declared her independence, I already knew exactly what that independence looked like. I already knew I deserved better than being treated like a villain in my own marriage. Olivia wanted freedom, and I was about to show her what true freedom actually costs. The thing about watching your marriage die is that nobody tells you how quiet it gets. Olivia stopped asking where I was going when I left the house early on Saturday mornings. Stopped caring when I came home late from work. Stopped noticing that I'd moved my clothes into the guest bedroom. She was too busy planning her girls' weekend to Traverse City. Too excited about her newfound freedom to realize I'd already given her all the space she'd ever need. She announced the trip on a Monday evening, barely looking up from her phone. Veronica's organizing a wellness retreat in Traverse City next weekend, just us girls. Nature and healing and all that. I nodded, asked her when she'd be back, told her to have fun. She seemed almost disappointed that I didn't object, like she'd prepared an entire speech about her right to go, and I'd stolen her moment by not caring. What she didn't know was that I'd already made a decision. The week before the Traverse City trip, I noticed she'd bought new luggage, expensive stuff, the kind you buy when you want to impress someone. She'd also purchased outfits I'd never seen, tags still attached, hanging in the back of her closet like secrets. I watched her pack on Friday morning before she left for work. Watched her fold clothes that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. Watched her tuck away jewelry that hadn't come from me. She left her wedding ring on the bathroom counter that morning, just sitting there next to her makeup bag like an accessory she decided didn't match her outfit. I took a photo of it, added it to the folder on my laptop that had grown thick with evidence over the past month. That Friday afternoon, after Olivia had already left for Traverse City with her friends, I did something I'd been planning for 2 weeks. I called Benjamin Carter, a divorce attorney someone at work had recommended months ago when I first started noticing the changes, but hadn't wanted to admit what they meant. I sent him everything I'd collected, every screenshot, every receipt, every photo. He called me back within an hour. "This is one of the clearest cases I've seen," he said, his voice matter-of-fact, but not unkind. "If you're serious about this, we can move fast." I told him I was serious. Told him I wanted to file on Monday morning. Told him I was done being someone's safety net while they practiced their high-wire act without consequences. Benjamin walked me through everything I needed to do over the weekend. Move half the money from our joint accounts into a new account in my name only. Pack my essential belongings. Prepare to leave the house we'd called home for 7 years. Document everything one last time. I spent Saturday doing exactly that, methodically dismantling 7 years of shared life with the same careful attention Olivia had used to destroy our marriage. But the confirmation I needed, the final piece that erased any remaining doubt, came Saturday night around 11 o'clock. My phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was male, slurred slightly with alcohol, genuinely confused. "Hey man, is this Daniel?" he asked, and my stomach dropped. "Yeah, who's this?" "Look, I don't want any trouble, but I'm at this bar in Traverse City and there's this woman here, Olivia. She's been all over my buddy Ryan all night, and she told him she's separated from her husband, but then I saw wedding photos on her Facebook and I don't know. It felt wrong, man." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in the silence of my home office for a long time. This stranger, this guy who owed me absolutely nothing, had more integrity than my own wife. He didn't have to make that call, didn't have to tell me the truth, but he gave it to me anyway because he recognized something was fundamentally wrong. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding or a moment of weakness. This was my wife in another city without her wedding ring, telling strangers she was single, living a completely different life than the one she'd promised me 7 years ago. The guy on the phone had confirmed what I already knew, but hadn't wanted to fully accept. Our marriage wasn't struggling, it was already over. I'd just been the last one to admit it. Sunday morning, I finalized everything with Benjamin. He'd have the initial paperwork ready by Monday afternoon. I spent the rest of Sunday moving money, packing my truck with 2 suitcases of essential belongings, and preparing the letter I'd leave for Olivia. No long explanations, no emotional appeals, just cold facts delivered with the same tone she'd used when telling me I didn't get a say in her life. Olivia came back from Traverse City late Sunday night, glowing and relaxed, immediately posting photos of lakes and hiking trails that I knew were performances because I'd already heard the truth about what her weekend actually involved. She walked into our bedroom, noticed I wasn't there, and didn't even come looking for me. That absence of curiosity, that complete lack of concern for where her husband might be, told me everything I needed to know about where I ranked in her priorities. Monday morning, I went to work early, met with Benjamin at 7 o'clock, and signed everything. He warned me this would get ugly, that Olivia would likely try to paint me as the villain, that her friends would rally around her and create a narrative where I was the controlling husband who couldn't handle a strong, independent woman. I told him I didn't care about the narrative. I cared about the truth, and I had mountains of evidence to prove what the truth actually was. I spent that entire day at work in a fog, going through motions, attending meetings where I heard nothing, responding to emails I'd have no memory of writing. My boss, Mark, noticed something was off, asked if I needed to take some time, but I told him I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I was determined. And sometimes determination carries you through when nothing else can. That evening, I came home before Olivia got back from whatever empowerment session she was attending. I took off my wedding ring for the first time in 7 years. Felt how light my hand suddenly was. How strange it looked without that band of gold that had marked me as someone's husband. I placed the ring on top of an envelope I'd prepared. A handwritten letter that said everything I needed to say without giving her the satisfaction of a face-to-face confrontation where she could twist my words or play the victim. The letter was simple. Asterisk, you wanted independence. You wanted freedom. You wanted a life where I didn't get a say. You have it now. The papers will be delivered Wednesday. Don't contact me. Don't try to explain. We both know what you've been doing. You're free now. I hope it's everything you wanted. Asterisk, I left the envelope on the kitchen table. The same table where she'd told me I didn't get a say in her life. The same place where I'd watched our marriage die over cold Chinese food just 4 days earlier. I took one last look at the house, at the photos on the walls of a couple that didn't exist anymore, at the life I'd built with someone who decided it wasn't enough. Then I walked out the door, got in my truck, and drove to the extended stay hotel I'd booked for the next 2 months. My phone started ringing around 9:30 that night. Olivia's name lit up the screen 23 times before I turned the phone off completely. She left voicemails I'd never listened to, sent texts I'd never read, tried to reach me through social media I'd already blocked her on. But I was done being the person she could manipulate, done being the safety net for someone who wanted to jump without consequences. I'd given her exactly what she asked for, and now she'd have to live with it. Olivia spent the first week after I left trying every possible way to reach me. And when that didn't work, she deployed her support system. Her sister, Jessica, called me 8 times in 2 days, leaving voicemails that escalated from confused to angry, talking about how I was being cruel and unreasonable and throwing away 7 years over nothing. Her mother, Christine, sent me a text message that was 4 paragraphs long about family values and working through problems and how disappointed she was that I'd given up so easily. Even Veronica tried to reach out through LinkedIn of all places, sending me a message about how I was proving every toxic masculine pattern she'd warned Olivia about. How real men don't abandon their wives during periods of growth. I didn't respond to any of them because there was nothing left to say. Benjamin had the divorce papers delivered to the house on Wednesday morning. And according to the process server, Olivia answered the door in her bathrobe, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She signed for the documents, read the first page, and apparently sat down on the front steps and cried for half an hour. The neighbor, Lisa, told me this later. Said she'd never seen someone look so completely shattered. Said she tried to comfort Olivia, but got pushed away. Part of me felt bad for about 10 seconds, and then I remembered the Instagram photos, the lies, the wedding ring abandoned on bathroom counters, the man in Traverse City who she'd told she was separated. You don't get to destroy something and then cry when you realize it's actually broken. The legal process moved faster than I expected because Olivia didn't contest anything. Benjamin said that was highly unusual. Said most divorces drag on for months with fights over assets and accusations and attempts to hurt each other through the legal system. But Olivia signed everything he put in front of her within days. Agreed to the 50-50 division of assets. Didn't ask for alimony, even though Michigan law might have given her some. Benjamin thought maybe she felt guilty, but I knew better. She wasn't feeling guilty. She was feeling abandoned. And there's a critical difference. Guilt means you recognize what you did wrong and want to make it right. Abandonment means you're upset someone stopped tolerating it, and you've lost your safety net. About a month after the papers were served, I ran into Charlotte at the Walmart near my new apartment. She was alone, looked exhausted, had that particular weariness that comes from maintaining a lifestyle you can't actually afford. She saw me, froze for a second like she was deciding whether to run, and then walked over with purpose. "You really did it," she said. Not quite accusatory, but definitely not friendly. "You just left her." I looked at her carefully. This woman who'd encouraged my wife to blow up her marriage, who cheered every boundary violation like it was some kind of victory for womankind. She made her choices, Charlotte. I made mine. Charlotte shook her head, started to walk away, then turned back. "Veronica said you'd be like this. Said men can't handle women who know their worth." I almost laughed because the script was so predictable, so rehearsed. Is that what you tell yourself about your ex-husband? That he couldn't handle your worth? Or did he just get tired of financing a jewelry business that never sold anything while you blamed him for not being supportive enough? Her face went red, and she walked away without another word. I felt bad for maybe 5 seconds. Then I remembered that these were the people who'd poisoned my marriage, who'd convinced my wife that independence meant destruction, that freedom meant betrayal, that empowerment required burning down everything stable in her life. They didn't get my sympathy or my patience. The empowerment circle fell apart completely about 6 weeks after that encounter. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Sarah had gotten engaged again, this time to a guy she'd known for less than a month. And when Veronica suggested she slow down and focus on her personal growth first, Sarah had told her to mind her own business and stop projecting her failures onto everyone else. Charlotte apparently stopped coming to meetings after her landlord started eviction proceedings and she couldn't afford to keep up appearances anymore. And Veronica, the great leader and architect of so much destruction, had simply moved on to a new group of women to manipulate, a fresh set of marriages to undermine with her toxic philosophy, dressed up as feminism and empowerment. Olivia was left with nothing. No support system, no empowerment circle, no friends. Who actually cared about her beyond what drama she could provide for their next meeting. The divorce was finalized on a Monday morning in early September, exactly 11 minutes in front of a judge who looked profoundly bored with the whole proceeding. 7 years of marriage, all those promises and dreams and shared moments reduced to signatures on documents and a gavel striking wood. Olivia sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with a lawyer she'd hired last minute. Someone who looked fresh out of law school and completely overwhelmed by a case that had no defense. I didn't look at her once during the entire hearing. Benjamin had advised me not to engage, not to give her any emotional reaction she could potentially use against me, but honestly, I didn't look at her because I didn't want to. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And whoever was sitting in that courtroom wasn't someone I had any connection to anymore. After the judge signed the final papers, I walked out of the courthouse into September sunshine that felt warmer than it should have for early fall. Benjamin shook my hand, told me I'd handled everything with more grace and dignity than most of his clients managed, said to call him if I needed anything going forward. I thanked him, got in my truck, and drove to work like it was any other Monday. Because in a way, it was. Life doesn't stop for your grief or your relief or whatever complicated mix of emotions comes with ending a marriage that should have lasted forever, but couldn't survive someone's need to destroy it. Olivia tried one more time about 2 weeks after the divorce was final. She showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning, looking smaller somehow, wearing clothes I recognized from years ago, back when she was still the person I'd married. She asked if we could talk, said she'd made terrible mistakes, said she understood now what she'd lost, and wanted a chance to explain. I stood in my doorway and looked at this woman who'd once been my whole world, who I'd have done anything for, who I'd built a life with that she'd dismantled piece by piece. I forgive you, Olivia. I really do. But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. You made choices, and those choices have consequences, and I'm not one of those consequences you get to undo. She started crying. The kind of deep sobs that shake your whole body. Asked me if there was any chance, any possibility that we could try again, that she could prove she'd changed. I shook my head slowly, feeling sad, but also certain. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you build a life that makes you happy. But that life isn't going to include me. She left without another word, and I watched her walk to her car, get in, sit there for a minute with her head on the steering wheel, and then finally drive away. I felt genuinely sad for what we'd lost, for the future we'd planned that would never happen. But I didn't feel even a trace of regret for letting it go. You can't save someone who's determined to drown. And you shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Those aren't just sayings. They're survival strategies for situations exactly like this. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got the promotion at work that I'd been working toward for 2 years. Mark pulled me into his office, told me he'd noticed a significant change in my focus and energy. Said I seemed more driven, more present, more engaged with my work than I'd been in a long time. I didn't tell him it was because I wasn't spending all my emotional energy trying to fix a marriage that was already dead. Wasn't walking on eggshells around someone who treated every concern like an attack. Wasn't constantly wondering what lie I'd discover next. I just thanked him, accepted the new position, and kept moving forward. I started dating again eventually. Nothing serious at first, just coffee with interesting people who didn't come with empowerment circles or toxic friends or a philosophy that independence meant destroying anyone who cared about you. It was strange at first, learning to trust again, learning to recognize red flags earlier, learning that not everyone would use therapy language as a weapon or rewrite history to cast themselves as victims. I ran into Olivia one final time about 14 months after the divorce at a Walmart on a random weekday afternoon. We made eye contact across the home goods aisle. Both of us frozen for just a second, and then we both nodded slightly and kept walking in opposite directions. There was nothing left to say. No closure that needed finding, no wounds that required reopening. We'd been married once, built a life together once, and now we weren't and hadn't. And that was the complete story. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled everything, if I wish I'd fought harder or insisted on therapy or given her more chances to explain or change. I tell them the same thing every time. She told me I didn't get a say in her life, so I gave her exactly what she asked for. Freedom works both ways, and independence means living with your choices without expecting someone else to catch you when those choices lead to consequences. She wanted a life without me questioning her, without me caring where she was or who she was with, without me being part of her decisions. I gave her that gift completely. Turns out it wasn't quite the empowerment she'd imagined when Veronica was feeding her those lines about reclaiming her power. What do you think about this story? Would you have done anything differently?